If we could stand up, and Board Member Gutierrez, if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, sir. Ms. Fano. Ms. Gutierrez. Mr. Meyer.
Present.
Ms. Weinberg. Treasurer Martinez. Secretary Wolf.
Here.
Vice Chair Board. Chair Jimenez.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. Need a motion for approval of the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, prior to doing that, I would ask my members if we could agree to defer agenda item D, which is the election of the authority officers, based upon the fact that, 8D at this time, because I'd like to have a resolution to figure out whether or not what we have going on legally, and if at that point we'll be able to determine whether or not we should have what members are going to be in what position, who is going to be involved with the board.
Okay, is that a motion?
I'm moving to defer the election of the authorities into our next board meeting.
Do I have a second? Second. Comments? Yes, Board Member Fano? No, you just seconded it? Any comments? Yes?
Mr. Board Member Martinez said to the next board meeting. This could take 4 or 5 months. We might have to meet between then. So do you want to defer the election to the next, till after the resolution of
Well, actually, what I want is if the matter goes to what I anticipate is a hearing on a preliminary injunction, if the injunction is granted during that period after if we're successful at the injunction level, we need to move forward then with the idea that we are going to, okay, and that I believe will be determined immediately after the legislation is signed and go in the law. That hearing will go forth, and that'll have a direct effect on our ability to move forward. So I don't want to defer this for 4 months. I want to defer this long enough to see what happened in that hearing. Then we can, at that time, as a board, make another recalculation.
Okay, just want to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Any other comments? So this is until the next board meeting, or what is your?
Well, I think our next board meeting is 8/27 of 19. So I would suggest that this be deferred to that board meeting on 8/27 of 2019.
Okay, 8/27 of 2019, and if there's some action by the state, and if there's any other action, any legal action, then we can always call for a special meeting.
Correct.
Okay, depending on the outcome of what the judge says, if it's state or not, we can always call for a special meeting.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, how many of you all are going to be in town during the summer? Some days out, but most of the time.
Most of the
Okay.
time.
All right. You're not going to be in. You're going to be in. Okay. Fair enough. All right. So there's a motion to approve the agenda, except deferring item D until the 8/27 8/27 meeting.
Yes, sir.
Okay. There's a motion. There's been a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The agenda's been approved. Declaration of voting conflicts.
Do any members of the board have any conflicts with any items on the agenda? Seeing none.
Okay. Citizens' comments. Any citizen that have any comment can come up now and make a comment. We'll give you 2 minutes. Anybody wish to come forward? Don't all rush at the same time? Okay. Nobody wants to, okay. Citizen comment period is closed. Chair comments, I will that till later. Approval of the summary minutes of the board meeting of May 9th, 2019.
Move.
Been moved and second. Any comment, any questions? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
So approved. Executive Director's report.
Mr. Chair, board members, my report will be brief. I will also include the TPO update, as I think Board Member Fano wasn't at the TPO meeting this last meeting. As far as the authority goes, since the last time we had a board meeting, we're continuing business as usual. We are moving forward with our construction on 836. As an update, many of the Many of you will notice that we have been removing barrier wall, painting, and paving will start very soon. Paving, the final pavement, the friction course will start appearing very soon. We believe both of the projects will be closed out by the end of August. Mentioned to the Board of County Commission in a letter that I wrote and to the TPO, many of our projects that were going to be let for construction earlier this year were placed on hold until our status is defined. Those projects included 82nd Avenue, 836 ramps to the Turnpike out to the extension, which was the, the first piece of the Kendall Parkway, and the express bus service. All of that has been placed on hold until we define our future. Later in the agenda, we're going to discuss the budget. We had a good discussion prior to this meeting, so we can go over that in a few minutes. I do want to give an update on the Parkway, on Kendall Parkway, as I've made a commitment to this community about moving it forward. The hearing on the CDMP is scheduled for the 15th of July. Depositions have been taking place. Albert Sosa with the firm of HNTB is our representative for MDX as a witness and as our representative on that in that case. We've already begun to acquire right-of-way. On the agenda, there's an item that was endorsed by the committee prior that sets the project resolution. We've acquired roughly 110 acres, are under contract or acquired for the project. Permitting has begun with all the permitting regulatory agencies. They're going through their process. The project environmental impact report has been completed and signed, and all the documents have been uploaded for public viewing, and that's a tremendous feat. We look forward to having the ability to move that project forward as we made the commitment to the community. And to put on the record again, because the question was asked during the budget workshop, our commitment to the community was that we would set toll rates equal to or less than the comparable trip on Florida's Turnpike. What our finance plan called for was 50 cents at each of the tolling locations. And that has not changed. That will not change as long as MDX moves forward. Mr. Mayor, board members, I don't have anything else to report as of MDX. I can speak to you about what we're doing with the legislation. As far as, and I'll get into that in a second, as far as the TPO adopted the fiscal year 2020 to 2024 Transportation Improvement Plan. MDX is part of that. Our budget includes the first year of it, which is something that we can afford. They also had a long discussion on House Bill 385 and appointments by the TPO to the GMX. And after a long discussion by the TPO, the conclusion was that they would wait until the bill became a law before they advertised anything, that anything prior would be preempting an action of the governor. So they will wait till the bill becomes a law before anything is advertised and appointments are considered by the TPO. As far as the legislation, the last month and a half or so, we have been working with our legal team, preparing. The bill has not been sent to the governor's office yet. We anticipate it to be sent any day now. He has 15 days from the time he receives it to take an action on it. He can sign it, he can veto it, or he can just let it become law on the 15th day. We are prepared to file for preliminary injunction upon the law becoming, upon the bill becoming a law. Our team is completely prepared. The chaos that we described back at the beginning of May, and the mayor and I were up in Tallahassee with the general counsel, it's the same that will occur in the 1st of July or the 10th of July. There is no plan. There's no transition. How do we make payroll? How do we pay contractors? How do we pay vendors? There's a lot of unanswered questions. So the operational chaos that we identified at the beginning of May has not been cured at the beginning of July. It still exists, and that is part of what we will explain to a judge, and hopefully get our day in court to argue the merits of the case, the home rule and the contract impairment. That's where we are.
I have to ask some questions about this, if I may. Upon the bill becoming effective, at that point in time, we still have standing to do a legal action.
Yeah.
And I presume that we would ask for a stay, so that then we'd still have our people answering the phone, keeping things moving, managing our contracts. Yeah, I need to believe that the day after, we still have people that are still doing SOP, making things happen. Is that going to be the case, or is there a feeling it's going to be shut down? That's unrealistic. We run a transportation system real time. We can't shut down.
That's a really good question, and that's part of what the argument we made up in Tallahassee. There is no plan, Secretary. As professional engineers and as what we do for a living, public safety is number one for us. As volunteers of the community and elected leaders of the community, public safety is number one. The bill, the way it's written, it doesn't make any sense that we walk away and not provide a service to the community. Yet there's nothing in the bill that talks about any of that. And everyone we've spoken to, anywhere in the state of Florida, at all branches of government, no one is looking at a transition or has addressed the transition, which causes me, as the executive director, tremendous concern, because the bond documents that we have a fiduciary responsibility to operate the system in a certain manner. And, I'm concerned of how do you let that go without there being some legal a binding agreement, a transition plan, something that relieves us of our fiduciary. I don't know the answer. I am speaking out loud because we don't know the answer, and nothing has changed in the last 30 days.
Well, then perhaps it's a question for the attorney. A successor agency inherits all of the agency's assets, obligations, I presume employment contracts, construction contracts, and they should be in effect. And the obligations to our employees should still be in effect.
I don't disagree, although I'm not the general counsel for GMX. I don't know how the position they'll take, but this agency is run by our board. It took from 94 to 96 for our board, original board, to get us in a place where we were up and running, and we took over the roads from the state of Florida. I'm not going to comment on if they can do that in a day or so, but the law does say they have till July 31st to establish a board where 2 members from the county, 3 members from the TPO, 3 members from the governor, and yourself, district secretary, will be the board. And they will have to adopt bylaws, they will have to set the agenda, work program, everything that this board has been doing on a regular basis. So, I find it hard pressed to get it done that fast, but they might have a plan. I've not been shown the plan or told anything. I'm preparing as a general counsel here to stop it for a lot of reasons, but a majority public safety reasons. We've reached out to say, hey, work this out. You really want us to be in command, we have a legal issue. We could discuss that, but just let us do this, and then you can have a transition, but we have not got any response on that.
I don't know who would have a plan. I'm the only known member of the future board, and I have no plan. My only plan is a hope that, the clock will strike midnight and everything will be the same, that we will continue on with our current obligations and day-to-day functions, even though it takes weeks to constitute a new organizational structure.
Yes, I don't disagree with you. I think they put a lot of burden on you because you're the only real board member. Being July 1st. You're the only assigned board member. The board is 9. I would argue that you need all 9 assigned before you could do any business, but you could also make an argument that all you need is 5. But if the original composition of the board is 9 and 9 members are not appointed, would argue that, the intent of the law was not.
Hey, I would just call a meeting right away.
I think you need 5 to do any kind of work or get away with any type of any kind of action, board action, because this agency, we work for the board. And you've delegated the day-to-day operations to Mr. Rodriguez, but they even say they're going to find a new executive director, and that's going to take some time. So whether they appoint an interim,
I could influence any transition. It would be, we need to continue business as usual, and no one should assume a change until a change is instituted.
I don't disagree.
I have a couple questions of my own.
Sure.
Does MDX cease to exist as an organization the second that the governor signs it? According to
the law, yes, but I
So
don't,
MDX, the organization, ceases to exist. Who do you all work for?
MDX.
Okay, so the organization that you work for ceases to exist. It says somewhere in the law that then the new board will determine on a case-by-case basis whether employees will remain with the new agency. Is that what the law says?
Roughly, yes.
If in fact the new agency decides that some of you do not stay, is there any obligation of the new agency to pay you for the time that that you worked under? Well, didn't work under them because there is no GMX as far as I know until the board is made. But that time where they take to evaluate you, is GMX, the new GMX, are they bound to pay you for the time that you worked under that time?
Contractually to the employees, no, but I guess you could probably make a quantum argument saying, hey, listen, I was here, I was working, you got to pay me.
Now,
But
what
no,
about the
not-
step where GMX takes on the obligations of MDX? And MDX employs people, expects them to come into work, put in 40 hours, and be paid a certain amount. I believe the successor agency inherited that until it changes that.
Is that what it says in the law?
I see where you're saying that, but they specifically carve out talking about employees and even the executive director. So yeah, technically, that would make common sense, but they've carved out an exception for themselves to say the board, all 9 members, are going to make a decision on each and every employee. So
I think although that implies if there is going to be a review and a decision, prior to that review and decision, there is no change.
That's not what the law
there's
says.
nothing in the law that says that.
Not what the law says.
I think that, I don't think we can assume that. I mean, I think that would be great for public safety and for the mayor, as the mayor of the county.
Assume that in the assumption of the obligations of MDX, there are exceptions, unless those exceptions are laid out. And employee retention is not an exception that's laid out.
Yeah, they flat out say they're going to review everyone.
We have actually talked about employees. It's not all, it's not, if that were the case, then it would have been mute on the point, and it said, we assume, GMX assumes all, contractual obligations, et cetera, employees, et cetera. And then later on, the board could decide, or the executive director, usually, which is the proper way to do it, the executive director determines the fate of employees, not the board. I don't know of any board that determines really the fate of all of its employees, except for a few, like the executive director. Because really, the executive director acts as a manager, the city manager in the case, and then we, the board, choose the executive director, and then the executive director manages the agency. I don't know of too many cases where a board does individual evaluations of employees of an agency and then determines who's going to stay and who's not. Frankly, I find that to be outrageous, all right? But besides the point, there's nothing normal about this law. There's nothing logical about the law. There's nothing you would consider, well, this should happen this way. It was a poorly thought-out law, and it was done on the run, and it was done, changed 50 times, and this is what you're going to get. At the end of the day, there's a number of unanswered questions. It even talks about contracts, and that the contracts will be reviewed. And then some contractors may be retained, and some contractors may not be retained, even in the middle of the contract.
Which is going to create other lawsuits.
Right, so there's nothing normal about this law. And so these are, valid questions, and that's why we think that there may be chaos when this happens, and that's why we want to make sure that this is, there's an injunction, so that there's an orderly transition to this organization. If they win, if the state wins. And so, congratulations on being the only board member that knows that they're going to be here. Maybe some of you all that are governor appointees are going to be okay. The other non-governor appointees are not going to be okay. I know I'm not going to be here. And so, that's the way it's going to be, unless, of course, we win in court. But do you have something else to say?
I think I'm going to get more questions from.
Anybody got questions? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mayor. Yeah, they got a bill that discriminates. They've got a bill that they were not silent against employees. Now, yes, and this is like a Cinderella story. The clock strikes at midnight and everything changes. So good luck to them, because they put public safety at jeopardy. Not only did they manage to do that, but they also managed to get Dade County in a major liability, because now it costs us more to do transportation. But you know what? This is one thing I do know of what they are doing. And in Spanish, we have it very simple in what we say. Aquí hay un gato escondido. But soon we'll know. And right now, we know their names. Pero hay un gato escondido. Thank you.
If I may,
Yes, go ahead.
thank you. Mr. Executive Director, when did session end?
Session ended May 3rd.
Okay.
May 4th, actually, technically Saturday.
So basically, ever since May 4th to today, it could have been sent to the governor's desk for signature, and we could have already had this moving forward in a transitionary period, as the secretary said, and we could have already had a ruling from the court if they had actually been concerned about the community in that capacity, correct?
Potentially, yes.
So I want everyone to think about that. This is going to make a major dramatic change as far as how transportation is doing. Since for more than 45 days, is that approximately right, plus or minus?
Yes.
It's been sitting in on the desks of the Speaker and the Senate President, and have not been transferred to the governor for signature. The issues, Judge Cooper, in his decision, made it very clear that within 24 hours of the signature, he would grant us a preliminary hearing so that when he would give us a decision. We are coming up to the July 1st deadline, and it is still not on the governor's desk to be signed. Why is that? What's the delay? Let's get an answer. If this is what's best for the community, if this is such a great law, if this is such a strong thing, why are the legislators waiting to the last second to provide it to the governor? If this was so great, and if they were so sure they were going to win, we would have the transitionary period between the ruling of the court and the July 1st and July 30th deadline. Instead, it's literally in limbo for, the only reason I can think of is they're trying to make this into a chaotic situation and lay blame on us, Mr. Mayor, because there's no other logical reason. What's the delays? Other bills have been cited, am I not correct? They have had signing presentations. They've had a whole bunch of bills signed. I believe they've been sending bills at a very rapid pace to the governor to sign at this time period as well, if I'm not correct. Is that correct, Counsel and Mr. Director?
Yes.
Why are we, what's causing the delay? This is going to affect this community greatly.
They caused the damage.
Right, but this is something that, we could have an answer to some of these questions already.
They've already caused the damage. And like you said, you're the only one.
That's the
Okay,
frustrating.
so I think,
Could I,
one more, go ahead. Board member?
Just to give you an example, Jim, and I hear your concerns. I too would like to think that perhaps it won't be as chaotic, but I'm hard-pressed to see it any other way. But on your point, the mayor touched on something on your point about the employees and the board having to conduct reviews. That very language right there negates your hope that it will be business as usual, because that's against our charter. Our charter dictates that we as the board hire, not elect, the executive director and our general counsel, who are our charter officers. We don't hire, fire, or review employees, so the very wording in that bill where they are claiming that they will take each employee one by one and you review and decide whether they're an integral part of the team already doesn't act as MDX. So it wouldn't be business as usual. Even from that, it's not minor at all because it involves employees and people's lives, but even from that minor perspective, they're already against a very key part of our charter. So I'm not as positive or hopeful as you are that it wouldn't be chaotic. It will be.
I don't assume that a new board would personally interview everybody. That doesn't have to be the review. The review could involve waiting for a new executive director to participate in that process.
But that's not the
I didn't
language.
see a deadline there.
But I don't want to.
But, Mr. Secretary,
It's worth to
that's not the
assume language that isn't on the bill.
What is the language?
That the board is going to review every employee.
Yeah.
That's what the language is. It doesn't say that you're going to wait for an executive director. It doesn't say you're going to wait for somebody else.
This board works through staff. The next board will also work through staff.
But it's not required to where we are. We're required to work through staff. I cannot tell Javier to go fire anybody. I can say I'm not happy with someone's services. Javier has to make the decision. Under this theory of the review, they can, the board itself, determine who they can or cannot keep. That's the way it's written. Now, unless they're going to change it in their bylaws, but that's the way it's written.
They cannot change it in their bylaws.
Right.
Because
Thank you.
the language is very specific. The language says, "The governing body of the agency shall review the employment of all employees of the former Miami-Dade County Expressway Authority to determine whether each employee will continue employment with the agency." That means the board itself would look at each and every single
I didn't
employee.
hear itself there. The board shall. Well, the board can direct others to do something, and it'll be accomplished.
I'm not sure that you can delegate that.
And that's something I would ask an attorney.
Okay.
But it isn't.
Well, it says shall, it doesn't say may.
Cannot. Shall is not, shall says you
Shall
have to do something.
review. The review must occur. It doesn't necessarily have to be in person. I haven't had that demonstrated to me. But
It will be,
comes
it will be
back
up to the board to determine it will be up to the board at the end, and not the executive director, to determine the fate of each employee. Even if the board says, you, executive director, now come back and give us a recommendation, it'll be up to the board to determine yes or no. So the board can override the executive director's decision on who to hire and who to fire. That's not, I don't believe, the case here in MDX. It's the executive director, and only the executive director, can determine who to fire and who to hire. This board will, in the case of MDX employees, will determine whether they stay or not. Even if the executive director, new executive director, wishes them to stay, the board can overrule it, because that's in the law itself. So it's a little different, and it just, when you look at that, it says, what is that all about? That's not how a board like this normally conducts business. I don't know of any board in the state of Florida that does it this way. I don't know of any, all right? Certainly don't know of any city that does it. You know, I'm the elected executive of Miami-Dade County. My board cannot tell me who to hire and who to fire. That's my purview only, and I'm the elected executive of the people. Our executive director is the appointed, elected executive director of this board, and only he can determine who is hired and fired. And obviously, our general counsel is also appointed and elected by this board, which is the normal way that these kinds of boards, you know, to work. So, look, there's a lot of unanswered questions. I think we can beat this horse to death, and we beat this horse to death a little bit. So I think we need to move forward and see what we're going to do.
But, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
yes, go ahead,
just
please.
Just to put it simpler,
Yeah.
even then, Mr. Secretary, it wouldn't happen until you populate a board, which I assume should take some time. If it doesn't, then, you know, then we know there were tremendos gatos hitting, as you say, okay? So if the board is quickly populated, or if the executive director's seat is quickly populated, then you can start to look to review 33 employees. In the meantime, you have 33 very worried employees and people who may have to take a walk because the uncertainty is never good for your pocketbook at home. So that's where the chaos truly plays in. in simplest, lamest terms. It's the waiting with employees, and anybody who's a manager knows you never want that sentiment to be peppered throughout your staff. It's just not good business.
I would comment that I have resigned from DOT many times, only been accepted once. But every new governor usually wants a letter of resignation, and I'm reviewed, and I'm retained. I don't believe each time that it's going to be accepted. And I hope that staff takes that kind of attitude. I know that it can be unsettling. You don't know the future. You're going to be reviewed. But the operative rule is continue SOP. Don't assume something that hasn't been done yet by the board.
Mr. Secretary, I mean, I'm going to disagree with you
Agree.
one more time. The employees of this agency, outside of the executive director and the general counsel, I could understand that if a new board came in, the general counsel and the executive director could submit their resignation for the board to determine whether they're going to be retained or not. The employees, the rank and file employees, that's not how it works anywhere. It doesn't work in the state of Florida. You're not a rank and file employee. You're the secretary. So at your level, I would agree. But I don't believe that there is wholesale resignations throughout the state of Florida every time there's a governor that changes. Obviously not, or else there would be chaos. So there is the 95, 98, 99% of the employees of the state of Florida remain as employees of the state of Florida, regardless who the governor is. There is the upper echelon, which are political appointments. Yes, those, tend to resign and say, okay, I serve at your pleasure. Yes, will you retain me or not? And even that, I think, is not a really good practice. When I became mayor, I did not ask for wholesale resignations. I knew who I wanted to fire. I knew who I wanted to retain. And so I wasn't going to put everybody through a wholesale resignation where, for me, it was like, come here, at least have the guts to, I have the guts to look you in the eye and say, I don't want you, all right? And not take the easy way out, well, I have your resignation, I'm just not going to retain you. I really don't like that, I don't really like that kind of management, let's put it that way.
And follow up, Mr. Mayor, I worked for 3 attorney generals here. I worked for Bob Butterworth, hired me, then I worked for Charlie Crist, and then I worked for Mr. Attorney General McCollum. My final years under Mr. McCollum, I was Deputy Chief Assistant Attorney General for the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. Nobody asked for my resignation. I wasn't a political appointee. I wasn't on the higher end. And certainly the governor didn't review me per se to determine when I was going to stay with the Attorney General's office. Whether or not there were others who were part of the more politically appointed people that were reviewed. For a board to be able to review every single employee, that's unprecedented at any state level or any level of any sort. That's disconcerting, and quite frankly, it's taking power away from whoever the next executive director is. So now that...
That's not what it is. You want to know really what it is, what they've done? It's an amiguito organization. It's let me hire my friends and let me see what friends I can hire. That's exactly what it is. It translates to that because it makes no sense and separation of powers and authority. It just goes to show that they want to have this public agency with public money run sort of like private. So they hire their friends, they don't go and they do it the way that it has been done, and it's been done correctly. Come on. The whole thing of the bill is just, it goes to show that there wasn't a lot of thought, but there was one major thought. Let's get rid of it and take over. It's the takeover factor because I hate them and we want to take over. That's bottom line. Let's argue it in court. Let's just move on. There's no end to this story because it's never going to end right. The only thing that has occurred for sure, that transportation now costs more for the people of Miami-Dade County. Okay? That's the bottom line. That's what has occurred. And the other thing that has happened, they have violated a transfer agreement with the state of Florida. So I hope Everybody that has a mortgage with a bank, they could maybe try to do that, justify that they no longer want to keep up with their contract and you can't take my house because, hey, the state of Florida did it to MDX, did it to Miami-Dade County. That's what they did, quite frankly. So they've set the precedent. State of Florida can do this, well, so can us, regular people.
All
What
right,
I-
again, this is, you know, we're beating a dead horse, and I think we need to move on. There are a lot of questions and, on this issue. Obviously, there's a lot of frustration, and we allowed to vent for a while. Now we need to move on with our business. Okay. Next, General Counsel's report, please.
I think we beat that one to death as well.
I think you beat that dead horse. There's nothing, well,
Anything else to beat on?
no, sir.
Okay.
No, I don't.
All right. Did you finish your executive director's report, by the way?
I did,
Okay,
Mayor.
very
Yes,
good.
I
TPO representative?
I
Mayor,
covered
I had a
it.
question.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a question regarding the TPO.
Okay, fair enough.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Well, can she do her report, and then you can have a question?
Well, I covered the report because she didn't go to the meeting.
Oh, she didn't? Okay,
Right.
fair enough.
She was sick. Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the question was follow-up, that you said on the agenda they discussed it regarding members and they pulled it out. Well, more importantly, where is it from the county, the brief that they were going to file, that they were joining MDX? Where is that process? Has it been done? Is there a timeline?
I haven't heard anything from the county as
Okay.
it relates to that, other than the resolution that was passed that said, take a look at it and authorizing them to adjoin if and when it was appropriate.
How are we being proactive in making sure that the county does do that?
I will talk to the county attorneys and see where they are in this, in the process.
That's super important.
Okay.
Thank you.
Treasurer's report.
Mr. Mayor, since we had a budget workshop today, what I would suggest is that we do a treasurer's report as part of item A, which is a approval of the annual 8A, if that's acceptable to you.
Yep, that's it, it is. So let's move on, item 7A.
Consent agenda, item A, travel approval, July 10th to the 12th, 2019, trip to Bonita Springs by Board Member Meyer and the Executive Director to attend a Team Florida meeting.
Move.
Moved, do I have a second? I'll second it. Any discussion? Okay. Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And passed. Item 8A.
Approval of fiscal year 2020 annual budget and funding requirements endorsed by the joint FPP and OECI committee earlier today, on June 25th, 2019.
Board Member Martinez.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, first I'll move this item for discussion.
Okay.
Does anyone wish to second it?
It's seconded already
Been
by the
moved and
secretary.
seconded.
Seconded by the Secretary. We had a very thorough and complete workshop on the budget today. If any of the members who were not here have any questions for Ms. Schaefer, Ms. Schaefer can go over it again and discuss it, but we felt there were some issues that were brought forth. It's essentially last year's budget with some slight changes, but we're looking to move forward. And one of the things that was in great discussion is the fact that we're going to have to rebuild, when we win, we're going to have to go back and rebuild our credit reputation with the bond market so that we can get back to the ratings that we had, because we're looking at an estimated between $75 to $150 million minimum of higher pays to satisfy our bond requirements in the future because of the higher interest we're going to pay because we've been downgraded. And we clarified very clearly that that was through no fault of anybody on this board or staff, that this has everything to do with the legislation, that in the 13 years I've been here, we've never had a downgrade of our credit rating in any one of the 3 locations, and that we're ready, willing, and able to do that once we move forward, but that it's going to cost us to have to, put on our walking shoes and make people feel confident in our abilities moving forward. If you or anyone else have any questions about the workshop or any of the budget, please, me or Ms. Schaefer are willing to answer them right now.
Have any questions?
I have a question for Marie.
Okay.
We approved it in the workshop about an hour ago, and the beautiful 5-year program with the proposed or hopeful 25% total relief promised on this bill across the board. Does this work program and does this budget work?
No, it does not.
Since it doesn't, is there a way that this new board or the new agency could make it work offer all these programs, maintain the system, and extend a 25% toll relief to the community?
No, it cannot. You're going to have to, comes with a cost. You're going to have to reduce the capital program.
Okay, so the answer is no.
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 I have a question for the general counsel. The law that passed the legislature hasn't been passed yet, but by the governor. Does it mandate that the work program takes precedent over any toll reduction?
Yeah, well, their law really says, they don't promise anything. They said up to a 25% reduction.
What
in
I'm saying,
tolls.
does it mandate that the work program
Yes, sir.
must be completed, and that if there is no, if you can't complete it with a toll reduction, then you don't do the toll reduction? Is that what it says?
That's a fair analysis.
Okay, so, and it also says that I believe it also says that the numbers, et cetera, have to be sent to the state for verification when they do, if they do implement a toll reduction, to make sure that the work program can actually be completed with their numbers? Is that what it says?
Yes, they have to do the study.
Okay. All right, so my question would be, is there any number that this board can reduce, percentage-wise, that would meet the requirements of that law? In other words, that the work program that we have would be completed in the time frame that would be completed, but we could still reduce tolls, I guess, to Miami-Dade County residents, another 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Is there a number there at all, or are we down to the point where basically we can't reduce anymore?
No, we cannot reduce any more if we're going to move forward with the current capital plan.
Not 1%?
No, sir.
Are you sure about that?
Yes, sir, I am. If you want to complete Kendall Parkway, the current capital program, complete the safety projects in the time frame that the commitment was made, then no, you can't reduce toll rates. For
But
every-
that's our time frame. Their time frame for the Kendall Parkway is something like 2029. Because I've heard, Senator Diaz say that that'll push back to 2029, the beginning of it, I believe. So our time frame starts next year,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
Most of it, yes.
So we need to put something together that says if it actually is pushed back to 2029, then how much of a percentage can we actually reduce right now? Which, by the way, I'm not proposing that. I just want to know where, if there is a reduction from the future board, at what cost, at what projects really were put in, either delayed or eliminated.
Right.
Although, if they do that, they actually are violating the law.
Correct.
But they can extend it, or they can't extend it.
Well, I don't know if they can extend it or not.
Well,
That's a legal
maybe
question.
that's a question to general counsel. Can they extend it and still comply with the law?
Can they extend,
Can they extend the work program and still comply with the law?
that's not what they put in the law. I mean, can they change the law next year? Yeah, they.
No, I'm talking about the board
No,
itself.
no, they can't, no. Ms. Schaefer is 100% correct.
So for us, we are now saying this is the work program, and the Kendall Parkway is part of the work program.
Yes.
Right.
Prioritize.
And we have it laid out how it's supposed to happen.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
What the time, and those things that are supposed to happen on the Kendall Parkway, right?
Yes.
With this budget that we have today, that we're passing today, we can get the Kendall Parkway, or a successor agency can complete the Kendall Parkway in the time allotted by this board, this budget.
Not with a toll reduction.
That, okay? I'm not saying that at all, okay? I'm saying if the future board, if they are bound by our timetable, our work program, and the timetable tied to that work program, all those things, plus the timetable, if they're bound by that, that's the number one criteria, right?
Yes.
Okay, before toll reduction.
Yes.
Okay, so that's why I asked you that question. With our work program and our timetable, you're saying that you can't reduce tolls at all,
That's correct.
at all?
That's correct.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, and board members, remember last year when we reduced reduced our toll rates by 6%, we deferred. We had to postpone over $192 million worth of projects for the reason that Secretary Wolf stated at the budget. Because we cash flow and there's an uncertainty of debt issuance, you have to work on a cash basis. When you're working on a cash basis, it is not prudent to commit to projects that require multi-year funding with uncertainty on how you're going to pay for it. So it has already taken an effect on our work program.
One final thing, maybe not the final thing. If MDX were to remain, or a successor agency, doesn't matter, all right, when will the Expressway Authority, whether it be Greater Miami or Miami-Dade, okay, when would they have to issue debt?
For the current capital program, we're going to utilize our entire reserves for fiscal year '20. It would be towards the end of calendar '20 that they would have to issue debt.
Calendar what?
Calendar '20.
Okay, 20. We have a bond counsel here?
No, sir, we do not.
No?
No,
We don't?
no.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to have to ask you. Do we still have a qualified opinion?
Yes,
We don't have any opinion.
We don't have any opinion.
Qualified.
We don't think we can get a clean opinion, though.
Not currently.
Okay.
Even if that's the whole issue. It's not just 2019, it's 2017 and 2018 legislation that were the ones that caused for Lois Ryder, our bond counsel, to say, I can't give you a clean opinion, I have to give you a qualified opinion. So
Okay.
2019 was just icing on the cake, but we had our deck action filed last October 2018 to challenge 2017, 2018 because of the language in 2017, and 2018.
All right, so we don't believe we can get a clean opinion.
No, sir.
So either us, and the language now in this new bill is actually more onerous than the language from the 17 and 18 bill, correct? In terms of the interference with the board?
I would agree with you.
Absolutely.
Yes. And not only, we don't, there's a couple wild cards in there. I mean, I don't know if they're going to assume our debt. I don't know if the bondholders allow them to assume our debt. If they have to refinance at the current rating, it's going to be a lot more expensive.
Well, let's put that aside. there's a method to my
I
madness,
know.
okay? I understand all that. But then, if the law remains the way it is, and the board, a new board, every time they make a decision, it has to be, I guess, approved by, or a lot of the decisions have to be approved by the state,
If it's financed, I believe.
finance related.
Yes, sir.
All right, so the autonomy of the board is called into question.
Yes,
Which
sir.
is basically the same problem that we had. Our autonomy was called into question. That's why we can't get a clean opinion,
Correct.
correct? So the ability of the new board to actually issue debt is hampered severely. I mean, I don't know if it's severely or hampered somewhat. Is there anybody here? Randy, do you have an opinion on this?
And Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah.
In one of the opinions we received, and I apologize, I don't know if it was S&P or in Moody's, they specifically stated that the next
do.
board will be even greater hampered than we are if the court rules in favor of the state's legislation because of this issue. That was actually in the downgrade that we received from, and I apologize, I don't remember if it was S&P or Moody's, hopefully Randy can clarify it, but in the language of the letter, it specifically stated that the board, the future created board, will have a greater difficulty with this issue than we do, because by then the court would rule in favor of the legislation. Am I accurate in that description, Carlos?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that issue that you're concerned about has already been discussed by, and again, Randy, was it S&P or Moody? I don't remember, or Fitch? It was one of the three. I remember reading all three of them.
I want to say it's S&P.
But it was clearly,
100%. But that's fair analysis, a paraphrase of what.
I think where you end up is that there's a credit issue, and then there is an issue with the opinion from the
Right, but
bond
they were
counsel.
saying that they were having a credit issue. That's
Now, a credit issue, I
Go
think
ahead.
we did a quick analysis,
course.
very high-level analysis. If there's two-notch downgrade, it could cost anywhere up to $150 million just to finance the current work program, okay? Now, in the event that there is an additional issue, such as getting a qualified opinion, we did a high-level analysis, again, to finish the current capital program, that would cost the toll payers somewhere around $350 to $380 million of additional interest, just because there's an unqualified opinion. And the way we did the analysis, we said if we have to pay 1% more than our current rates, that's what the cost would be.
That's not what I'm getting at, so, excuse me, there's a train of thought I have here, okay? I understand that's going to cost more.
Yes, sir.
That's already been documented. My question is whether a new agency may be even able to issue bonds at all. Do you think a new agency will be able to issue bonds, or if they can, will the cost be so high that it throws our entire work plan out the window?
When I had this conversation with the attorneys, they said that there'd still be a qualification because whatever bonds, unless they refund all the debt out and defease all the outstanding debt, and we've looked at taxable refundings, and it's very expensive unless you push the debt out as far as possible, which would probably double or triple your total cost over time. But you can do it at those higher rates and still stay within the rates that we're looking at right now. The point that I wanted to get at is I've only been doing this about 30 years.
Could you put your name on the record, please, for us?
Randy Topol with Hilltop Securities. But I rely on my desk. My desk has been doing this probably even longer than I have, and he sees probably 20 to 30 times more deals. That's probably inaccurate, probably 50 to 100 times more deals than I do. I asked him specifically, has he's ever priced a deal from a desk perspective, either as a FA or as an underwriter, with a qualified opinion on tax-exempt bonds, and he has not. And I've worked on over $30 billion.
You've only been at this for 30 years. I mean, you can't go, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's, to say it can't be done is not, because there's always a cost.
Right.
Someone's will always buy in, and they'll look at the underlying opinion that's qualified, and they may decide to take that risk for an extra 1 or 2 handle, which is the interest rate, 4% to 5% or 4% to 6%. Everyone's willing to buy something with a certain amount of risk. So to say that they can't access the markets, that's not true. But at what cost? Now, the point when we're talking about all this is all along, all these capital plans, the number one priority that this board has put on me is you need to structure it so there's no toll rate. I'm not going to be putting you into position in the future that requires toll rate increases to complete these projects. That relies a little bit, having a little bit of cushion in there. So to have that kind of a certainty that there will be no future toll rate increases, could someone say you could lower it 1%? They might be able to do. But not with every 1% you take away, increases the likelihood, and it right now is very, very tight. I can't stand in front of you with the same amount of confidence I've had over the years to make sure that this board will not be forced into toll rate increase based off the reductions and the limitations that are been placed on you. But that's what's going to go forward. People can lower things today, but 2, 3 years down the line, they're going to have to increase tolls.
You have to pay the piper.
So Randy, if you take it down to razor thin, okay? What could you do? What could we do? Razor thin. No possibility that, hey, something didn't come through, we'd have to raise the rates. And I'm just asking this because I just want to know what may happen in the future.
I don't,
Not to us, not to this board, okay?
no, I can't tell you that because I have never run something to the absolute minimums that it would take, because I can't contemplate that, considering all the promises I've made to this board over the years about not putting you in the position. But when we were looking at all the different scenarios, we're down into the 130s, assuming we build everything, and that doesn't even include my friends over here that always find ways to add more projects. They always add more projects, and there's no room for that. With the 135, if you have a hurricane season like last year, that 135 goes down to like a 121, 122. There's no room for your cash funded. And the reason we cash fund, I would love to be able to issue all the debt on day one, but we don't have the latitude to sit around for 10 years to wait till we have enough cash. Because if we had enough cash on our books, someone will say we're being irresponsible and try to take it. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. We have to leverage our money as much as we can. And before, this board had a policy of 1.5. And that 1.5 was what got us to our ratings. We can't come close to 1.5 now. So it's, when we go forward, just be ready. If you want credit to improve, it's not going to happen. It took us years and years. When this entity started, it was a A-, A3 type credit. It took us close to 20 years to get up to the A1 category. But during that process, the investors saw our financials, and we historically, consistently priced through our ratings. We're going to be on the other end of that going forward because our reputation has been harmed, and it's going to take a while to get that back. It's not a 1 month or 3 months. It's going to take a while.
Well, I just wanted to put that on the record so that if we, this board said, no, it couldn't reduce the rates anymore, there is a way to reduce rates, but it would not be a prudent step in your estimation.
If you want to make sure that the likelihood of toll rate increases stays at a very low level, then if you're lowering those tolls, because every dollar we take out, we have to fund up additional capital and capitalized interest. So for every dollar you take out, you're going to have to put $1.20 to $1.25 back as bonds, and then you pay the interest on the $1.25, and even at 4%, that turns it into 2.25 to 2.5, depending, because we're going to be back end loading it. It's a lot of extra cost.
The final cost to the people of Miami-Dade will be more, even though they may say, oh, look, I'm getting 2 cents off on the toll. At the end of the day, the people of Miami-Dade will end up paying more anyway. Correct?
That is exactly the way it works.
Correct.
And that's assuming, Mr. Mayor, that the Auditor General even thinks they can make any kind of reduction, so.
Fair enough. No, I just want to make sure, because, I just want to make sure we put that on the record, that yes, there is a way to reduce the rates, but it would be irresponsible, and at the end, it would cost the people of Miami-Dade County more by reducing the rates even more, because then we'd have to, you're right, it would have to be 1.25, $1.25, $1.30, and then you're paying interest on the $1.30 that you didn't have to pay before. So the people of Miami-Dade County actually end up paying more. Okay, any other questions on the budget? I just wanted to make sure everybody understands that. I wanted to put that on the record. And my concern about the work program in the future, my concern about the ability of ourselves right now, unless we get something changed in the law that lifts this cloud of this qualified opinion, that we need to do something about it regardless of whatever happens with the new law. If we actually survive and we actually prevail in the courts, that we have to go back to the legislature or continue our action to say that you are actually costing the people of Miami-Dade County more money because of this qualified opinion, and will increase the cost of borrowing because we can't get a clean opinion, which is what started this whole thing to begin with. And they didn't believe us, or maybe they did believe us, and some people were told not to believe us, so that people get some cover. But this is the beginning and the genesis of the entire episode, is this whole issue of the qualified or non-qualified opinion, or clean opinion, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Board Member Martinez.
Real quickly, Mr. Mayor, as you recall, even as of this legislation was being passed at the end, there were representatives and elected officials stating that all of the concerns of the credit agencies were resolved because the letters that initially were sent raising red flags about this legislation were cured with the final package that was finally passed. S&P's concern or downgrade came after the legislation and was specifically named discussing it. So there were a lot of conversations about how this was scare tactics on our part and red herrings, and even after it was passed, they continued to receive concerns about how this was going to affect the expenses to the people who live in Miami-Dade County, how it was going to cost a higher amount of interest, and it's going to put this next board, if we lose, and I don't believe we will, in a position where they're going to literally have to either not complete the promises of reducing the tolls or violate the law by not completing the program. It's basic math. They can't do both.
Okay,
And they might end up having to do both,
I understand.
reducing the program and not being able to reduce tolls.
Fair enough. Yes,
And
Sure.
and you can correct me if this is not the right venue or topic to ask this question, but since we're on the discussion, we're talking about the significant and severe impact that this legislation or the multiple legislations over the last 3 years are having and will continue to have on this agency or any future agency. But serving on Team Florida as the MDX representative, they've also expressed concern from a statewide level as far as how this unprecedented intervention by the state legislature has had on MDX and its bond ratings would also have on other tolling agencies throughout the state of Florida. And we just went through a legislative session where 3 new tolled expressways were approved. And so I was just curious as to if there's maybe the executive director or Randy, I don't know if you can speak to it. I'm just curious as to what potential implication or impact does this also have from a statewide perspective, if there's any at all. I don't know if it's the right venue to ask that question, given the item, but.
I think why don't we move on this, and then we'll ask that question at the end, okay? Fair enough. All right, so we have the approval of the fiscal year 2020 annual budget and funding requirements.
It's been seconded and it's been moved.
Discussion on this. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, the budget's approved. B, the approval of the MDXF fiscal year 2020 to 2024 5-year work program.
I'll move it.
It's been moved and it's been seconded. My only question, again, I want to make sure that the Kendall Parkway is in this particular 5-year program.
Yes, it is, sir.
Fair enough. Okay, any questions? Any further questions? No, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so it's we now have a new 5-year work program. It's part of the record. Thank you. Item C, approval of the MDX project resolution 19-02. Go ahead, Executive Director.
Yes, this is the project resolution for the Kendall Parkway to acquire right-of-way. We had a discussion in the committee meeting, and this is for your approval.
I'll move it.
As I said, we've already acquired a number of parcels. Claudio, how many, the numbers?
We have acquired, thus far, 3 of them have closed, 13 are under contract, and there's 3 verbal agreements for a total of 19 parcels at roughly $4 million and 110 acres, roughly.
4 million almost, and 110 acres have been acquired, and the permitting has already started with the regulatory agencies.
Okay, and in this particular, this right-of-way acquisitions actually helps the Everglades restoration?
Yes, sir.
Do we have a motion?
I'll second you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any discussion? Thank you. Item D has been deferred. Informational item, procurement report.
It's a report in any questions. I've had board members ask me questions about What we have done, board members, is we've tried to pay all of our vendors up to date. We've requested that they submit their invoices up to date. And as I've made comment to many of them, we don't know what the status is going to be next week. We believe we'll be successful in an injunction, and hopefully we can continue business as usual.
Could I ask a question? Were there any contractors that voiced an opinion in support of MDX? Anybody who had a contract where they wrote letters, et cetera, of support for the agency and against the bill? Did we have any of that?
Mr. Mayor, I think many of them are sitting here. I see a few of them in front of us.
Okay.
In fact, to answer Board Member Meyer's question, I would ask if we could invite Mr. Regan, who actually wrote a lengthy letter to Senator Brandis and to members of the legislature, that this was not a local issue, that this issue of affecting bonds and affecting toll financing was a statewide issue. And Ed, if you can introduce yourself and what you do and
Ed Regan,
how long you've been doing it.
Ed Regan, CDM Smith, and 45 years I've done it. So I'm even longer than Randy. By the way, I'm not 100% sure I'm correct about this, but in 45 years of working, and we do 65% of revenue forecast for 65% of the revenue bond issues in the entire toll industry in the United States, I don't think I've ever actually seen this type of legislative intrusion. Basically, an intrusion. I've seen a lot of legislative interference and people, you know, governors vetoing toll increases and things like that that have concerned rating agencies. But in this particular case, the real egregious thing is the legislature taking action and inserting itself between the issuing agency and the bondholders, and that's what 30-year bond terms are all about. That's sacrosanct, and that's the reason rating agencies have downgraded you. And their concern, I think, about future additional downgrades is that if this gets reinforced in the courts, then it does raise the exact issue that Board Member Meyer raised, and that is that this is a state intrusion. It's not a local issue, which is what I tried to send emails to these legislators. It's not a local issue like they all tried to make it seem. It is a state intrusion within a bond covenant between an autonomous agency and bondholders. And that means that every agency in the state, certainly every toll agency, even local toll agencies, are subject to that same risk. That what's to stop the state legislature from, or governor or whoever, from intervening itself in front of the protection that the bondholders have. And that is really, really, really an important point. I tried to stress that to Team Florida. I tried to stress it to everybody. I sent emails to anybody I can find. I'm not sure anybody listened. Maybe a few people did. I wasn't terribly happy about the strength of the Team Florida response because, you know, it's a question whether Team Florida is acting as an advocate and a representative of the toll industry or just an advocate for the idea of tolling. And that's something I'll talk about at their next board meeting. But the point I want to make is that this does introduce a layer of risk to every toll issuer in the state, maybe even beyond that. It sets a very undesirable precedent. Now, I don't know whether that fact can also be brought up in the legal action that you have. I mean, I know you're talking about other issues, but that particular thing. While I'm here, though, can I ask one question, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman? I'm sorry. Coming back to the question you asked a few minutes ago about how this would affect, let's say, the ability to do an additional bond issue for Kendall Parkway. The confusing thing to me, and maybe you have a legal interpretation of this, is there's language in the bill, I think, because it changed so many times, but I think there's still language in the bill which says that whatever the agency is, it cannot raise toll rates for 10 years. Then they softened it and said after 5 years you can maybe consider it, but they always put in except as needed to meet toll covenants of existing debt. Okay, that's a catch. Well, toll covenants may be a 120 coverage or a 125 coverage, which is why the ratings go down, as opposed to 150 or 175. But the question is, without raising rates, I don't know how you could actually issue additional debt if you're bound by not being able to raise rates unless the toll covenants of the existing debt are violated. In other words, how could they, I'm not sure they could actually issue debt additional debt. If they can't raise rates, and I'm not sure they can raise rates, whoever you are, whatever agency it is, I don't think they can raise rates unless it's in violation of the current debt toll covenants. I don't know if you have an interpretation on that or anything on that.
Oh, that's a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wait for the answer?
I'm just going to listen from there. I never
I
stopped
don't.
talking,
I
so
think
I
you
mean,
were
I
bring-
figured you want me to sit up.
I think you bring up a very good point. I think it's the catch-22.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
can't,
that's
and
exactly what it
they've
is.
written that into the law. They also, what you said about the bond covenants, Part 1 had that in there, and we have brought that up in our injunction here, our injunction request and our deck action, is that you violated one of the laws, which was 348-0010, which says they will not interfere with the bond covenants.
Right.
And ironically, it's in the new law for GMX. So I really don't know if they just put it in there for the heck of it, but that's one of our issues.
Board members, I think that what Ed is getting to as well is that if you cannot touch toll rates on the existing system and you're actually going to ask to reduce them, which impacts the whole work program, but yet you want to prioritize Kendall Parkway, that is why at the workshop there was a discussion about what toll rates we had committed to the community, and we made it very clear for the record that it was at or below the same trip on the turnpike. Double those toll rates out west and potentially start building part of the Parkway, but that would go against what we told the community, and that would actually have an impact on traffic on traffic. It would go against what our purpose and need was, which was to get traffic to take two different routes. If you have to increase it so high, so there's cause and effect on both sides, and I think that's one of the things Ed was referring to. So,
Thank you.
Okay.
thank you.
Board Member Myers, your questions? Very good. I do have a question for Board Member Wolf. When does, I've seen that on the 826, they're testing. When will those express lanes go into effect? In August, and do you have any information on the express lanes inside the turnpike? When will that go into effect?
But I can get you that information. I'll
Please,
find it out.
if I
and get it to
could,
you.
I would certainly appreciate it. Do we know what the rates are going to be on the 826?
No, I don't know. I can get that for you.
Yes.
We do that traffic and revenue forecast, too. I mean, the statewide policy on express lanes is 50 cents minimum toll per tolling segment, and I think there's 3 tolling segments on the 826 part. So a through-trip toll will have a minimum of $1.50. But the rate
Is that the turnpike, or is that the 826?
826.
826.
Oh, did you ask the turnpike? I thought you.
No, I mean, I asked for both. He doesn't know when the turnpike's going to light up, and he thinks that 826, the Palmetto Expressway, which has never had a toll in its
Right.
entire history, now will have a toll. So that's going to start up sometime in August. It's
Right.
$1.50, but you know,
Well, the rates are obviously dynamic. They adjust automatically based on policy as traffic reaches certain levels.
it's dynamic just like it is on the
I-95.
I-95.
Correct,
I think the I-95 can go up to like $12.
1050, but one of the toll points.
No, I think it can go up to $12. I think it's more than $10.50.
Well, okay.
It's 1050.
$10.50 one way.
One way.
Okay.
One of the, and there was an attempt to reduce that, by the way, in legislation this year, too. I think that finally got scrubbed before it got passed.
Sorry, sir? Say
There
it
was
again?
also, versions of your bill had references to changing that level, too. And I think that got.
Seat?
No,
that
it
got
did not.
pulled- No, it got pulled out.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Okay.
But I want to say that in our forecast for the 826 part, at least 1 or 2 of the tolling points do get up fairly high, meaning they get up to, say, $4 or $5. And there actually is, because when we do our forecasting, we have to now allow for the revenue impact. If the speeds drop below 40 miles an hour, they have to charge a minimum toll, which is having an impact of about $10 million reduction of revenue on I-95 because of what's happening already. We estimate that one of the tolling points on 826 will actually suffer, not that big a deal, but will suffer occasional periods where the speeds will drop below 40 miles an hour.
The 40-mile-an-hour requirement on the I-95 is from where to where?
It's everywhere. The 40-mile-an-hour requirement is everywhere, okay? Every managed lane in the state, if the speeds on any section, the way it's divided up, the state is divided up into tolling sections, okay? I-95 currently has 3 that are operating now, and eventually it'll have up to 10 when they complete the entire thing. So the minimum toll is 50 cents per section, the maximum toll is $10.50, but the 40-mile-an-hour is anywhere.
Time out. Okay. You said that the I-95 was going to end up with 10 different sections?
All the way up to Palm Beach County, yes.
Palm Beach County, okay.
And most of them are not as long as, the first one is the longest one. The section 1 that you know of between here and downtown and GGI, Golden Glades Interchange, is actually an 8-mile section, and that's the longest. The rest of them average about 5 to 6 miles in length.
The $10 you're talking about, is that for 8 miles?
Yeah, the $10.50 is, the maximum toll policy right now is $1.50 per mile. That's the reason they get the $10.50. Okay, and they tried to reduce it to $1.25, and that was taken out. But that applies statewide. The 40-mile-an-hour criteria applies statewide, and what that means is that, first of all, the FDOT policy is that if speed, they want to set rates so the speeds are at least 45. But that's a different number. The new legislation that came in basically took effect in July of 18, says if the speeds actually drop below 40, the state has to charge the account the minimum toll, which is 50 cents. So what's happening is, if you could drive out there this afternoon and a sign may say $9.50, and people might be being charged 50 cents. Just because of the fact that the speeds actually periodically drop below 40 miles an hour.
How's that determined?
Yeah.
They have to track the speeds through the sun guide system, I assume, Mr. Secretary?
And I'm sorry, that does not happen. If you look at my
No, but
SunPass account.
I'm curious, the only
never
way that it
happens.
really could happen on an individual basis is there was a gantry on both sides, in and out. There's no gantry on the I-95. If you get off on the Golden Glades interchange, there's no
Yeah, I
gantry
mean,
there.
how do they actually measure the speed at sun guide, I guess? I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how to.
I guess I'm going to have some public record requests on how they determine that.
Once I cross,
Right.
and I commit to that 1050, I mean, living in the north part of the county always and having to come down here for work and MDX, I commit to the 1050, which is almost always the cost for me. Doesn't matter what time of day. That's what I get billed for.
Take a look at
Many
your-
days
at
of
your
those
thing.
5 days I'm coming down here, I drop below 40.
Okay,
Sometimes for the entire stretch of the 8 miles.
Our study.
This is news to me, Ed,
Our
by the way.
updated
Thank
forecast
you.
that we just completed in April or so, basically, because we started getting information from the district, I guess. We get it through FDOT central office, but basically, it shows the number of hours or minutes and so forth of each day, of each weekday, where the speeds drop below that, and where they give a number that says the amount of tolls we should have charged and the amount we actually charged.
Paid $55 million in toll receipts on Phase 1, which is south of Golden Glades. And that is now revised downwards $11 million, and downwards next year $13 million. And it
that
is, in
reason,
fact,
right?
by the application of this less than 40-mile-per-hour standard that we are waiving $11 million of fees. That's really happening.
Wow, I just don't see how that's tracked. I would love to get my hands on that report so I
You
can
just,
compare it to my
you just got to
SunPass
look
account.
at your SunPass. The
think
the
I'm
thing they
owed
got to hope
hundreds of
for is that
dollars.
overseas. Because the problem with it is as people become aware of that, it's terrible, and I'm talking about it now. I hope the Miami Herald's not going to write an article about this, but anyway.
I think he was here. If not, I'll bring him back.
Yeah, okay, yeah. No, but seriously, the issue is that particular piece of legislation really interferes with the ability to manage demand by pricing. Because
Would be, how is it tracked? They don't have an exit gantry on the Golden Glades. How could you possibly know what my speed is unless you got a radar just on my car? How do you know that? How would they know that? If they don't have an exit gantry, how would they know that?
I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't know.
So,
We just get the
Secretary,
date.
how would you know
We just
that?
get the
How do you
actual
guys
date.
do that?
I don't know that, but I know that it happens because we're out $11 million this year.
So let me ask a question, if I may. Let me ask a question. I'm already bumper to bumper entering the express lanes on the Golden Glaze interchange. I'm already well below 40, and I'm staring at that price gauge on top. It still says 1050.
But will you build 1050, though? That's the question.
No, my monthly bill it's high, always high, because of my commutes. So I don't think I'm being billed 50 cents when 3 days out of the 5, I'm paying the 1050.
Are you going
At under
slower than 40 miles an hour?
I'm entering under 40 miles an hour. I'm literally parked. Well, sometimes, by the way, the
We're not
general
talking about the
purpose
general
lanes
purpose
are.
lanes, we're talking about the express lanes under 40.
Yeah, no, the express lanes, absolutely.
Northbound in the PM
No,
fails
I'm
every
asking
day,
for an operational question.
40-mile-an-hour effect, every single day.
No, I'm asking an operational question. If it's already visibly well below 40 miles an hour, why is that price gauge announcement on top already it's still saying
We
1050?
do not change the price on the sign.
Okay, no, that's.
And just
It's trying to
be
keep you
clear,
out.
The reason they have to do that is because if they change the price to 50 cents, then it would be going 10 miles an hour. Everybody would try to get in there. So,
Thank you, Ed.
Right, they're trying to scare you out, okay?
No,
Because
yeah,
because
that
they-
part I
yeah.
remember from their coming around to the linear communities when I was on the Aventura Commission, and I was adamantly opposed to express lanes, except now I am left with no choice.
So one more question. Is it the same holds true for to Turnpike? Is it 50 cents every?
now, the turnpike is set at 25-cent premium over the turnpike toll unless speeds get close to the 45 miles an hour, then they raise that increment. But I'm
And
not
it's
sure,
gonna
I'm
go
not
up?
sure they've done that anywhere yet.
It's going to go up?
Yeah, but.
Past 25
They
cent.
have the ability to do it, but I'm not sure they've had to do it yet. I don't know.
Well, then it would defeat the purpose if they
Yeah.
didn't do it.
No, and they will do it supposedly. The only thing is, right now, it's set at, unlike the 50 cents, if you ever have a toll in a toll situation, since you're paying a toll to be on a road anyway, it's a 25-cent increment over the regular toll. To get in the express lanes, it's, on other express lanes, it's a 50-cent minimum toll, and that raises only when the speeds start to drop. Except with the new legislation, then they go down even lower when the speeds really drop. Got it?
Oh, we're going to get it, all right. So, okay.
Thank you,
sir. I
Ed.
appreciate it. That was very informative. Thank you very much.
Mayor,
Yes,
just a
sir.
quick question. You had shared with the community and possibly at the Senate committee meeting, I don't recall if it was there specifically as well, but you had made the comment that MDX, from a toll perspective in Dade County, charges roughly 40% of the average toll payers, the tolls that are charged within the county.
Yes.
And so 60% would be coming from FDOT and any ancillary facility.
And the Turnpike? Yes.
Turnpike. Did that figure
No.
calculate this?
No.
Thank you.
So the percentage actually to be paid to the state or the Turnpike, when the Turnpike lights up their managed lanes and when the 826 lights up their managed lanes, the percentage that goes to a state road, either Turnpike or FDOT, is actually going to be higher. So I would figure we're going to down to, MDX will probably be about 30% of the actual tolls being collected here in Miami-Dade. So, and while the state regulates the tolls on MDX, that's 30% of the system. The rest of the system, the 70%, is actually able to raise the rates every year on a CPI basis. That's the fallacy. That's the entire big lie that has been perpetrated on this community. Unfortunately, we did not do a good job of actually putting the spotlight where the problem is. And the legislatures who actually control the state and could have done more. Obviously, look, they even, the reduction of the express lanes, they didn't do that. They didn't tell the state they couldn't, the CPI and the state and the Turnpike, they didn't do that. So they're going to continue to raise rates. They're going to continue to take more money out of Miami-Dade. And then they're going to somehow claim victory with MDX. I don't think it's going to really claim to be too much victory at the end, because in the end, the people will see the truth of what really happened here. Okay, anything else? Any other comments? Have a great summer, try to stay cool. Hope to see you on August 27th, maybe before, okay? And again, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Yeah, they've got like some different group. It's like, Jay Fletcher's, they've got like a ton of people each